Hi, this is Jennifer Todd. I'm co-founder of the basketball tournament, and this is one-on-one with ADC Partners.
Hi, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners. I guess the theme of this week's episode is all about taking chances, something my guest Jennifer Todd knows really well. Consider some of her rolls of the dice. As a freshman in college, she joined a lawsuit that would become a landmark case involving Title IX. After she landed a dream job in sports, she left it to travel the world for a year and a half. Looking to restart her career, she took another gamble and helped launch the basketball tournament, the first of its kind $1 million winner-take-all tournament. In our conversation, we'll touch on each of these chapters of Jenn's wild ride and dive into some of the things she sees as absolutely essential to her success, like finding her voice, trusting her instincts, and belief in the projects she works on. Enjoy. I think most people know you as co-founder of the basketball tournament. But before that ever became a thing, you had this other kind of significant role in the history of sports and sports business and everything that sort of have come from that moment, because you were a gymnast at Brown University in the early 90s, and the university made the decision to eliminate the gymnastics and the volleyball teams. And so what I'm hoping you can do is take a moment and recall what that moment was like and how you and 11 other Brown athletes decided, hey, wait a minute, that's not okay, and decided to push back. Can you reflect on that moment for a minute?
I was a freshman, actually. I hadn't even arrived on campus when they cut those teams. And just for clarity, they cut 2 women's teams and 2 men's teams.
Okay.
25 years ago, Title IX was not something anyone was really talking about, right? It was part of the educational amendments of 1972. And so it had been around for a long time by that point, but nobody knew anything about it. Nobody was talking about it the way they do now.
And it hadn't really been applied to women's sports at that point. This is all still sort of untrodden ground.
Yeah. So the other thing some people don't know about Title IX is it applies to, hiring and sexual harassment and equal opportunities on campus and within the athletics department. And so it applies, across universities, any federally funded universities. But again, nobody was even talking about those things either. And so when our team was cut, it was made club varsity. And so I found out through my neighbor, who was also a student at Brown. Nobody from the university called me. And
the neighbor network.
The neighbor network. And others of my classmates found out through the newspaper or, no direct means, I guess.
So no formal notification from the university at all?
No. And so we basically were told, look, this is going to be a club varsity team. So it should be equivalent to a varsity experience, except for that you guys will eventually have to come up with your own funding.
Hooray.
8 women, who are in college without a lot of means generally to come up with their own fund. Now, our budget wasn't that big. Our coach was still under contract. And so we didn't have to cover her salary, but we did have to, cover the rest of the expenses going forward, but not in that. I went into campus thinking, okay, this is going to be just like a varsity experience. And we don't really know until we get on campus what that looks like anyway.
Right.
The upperclassmen had a much better sense of what that was. They had actually won the Ivy League championship the year before. So you come in as a wide-eyed freshman. You don't really know what to expect, but the upperclassmen, I'm assuming, have a different position associated with this. And that's how the ball more or less kind of got rolling. Yes, that's right. And so, when we got on campus, we met them. We're a small team, so we're very tight generally. And they're sort of telling us, generally what we might be able to expect. But through the course of that fall and into the spring, we were locked out of our locker room while we were at practice, the varsity locker room that we were in, with all our stuff inside. We were told we couldn't use the varsity weight room. We were told we had restricted access to the trainers. We couldn't compete on certain days because we needed to take over the gym.
So as a club sport, you really felt like, okay, we're not on an equal plane with the
Yeah,
varsity
sort of
sports.
deprioritized, I
Yeah.
would say. It's like
Yeah.
the lightest way to say it. And we sewed our own leotards. I mean, I mean, I look back now and I'm like,
We all
what
have
was
familiarity
it?
with that. I mean, I have
You
to do
know?
my own too.
And so I look back and I'm like, wow, that was a crazy time. And we
Right.
met with the athletic director and we basically said, like, this doesn't feel like a varsity experience, and
Right.
he was sort of like, the decision is final.
Huh.
And at the same time, in parallel, some of the more senior members of our team had been introduced to one Title IX and to a law firm in DC that offered to do it pro bono.
Was this a little, did you jump in with both feet, or was there a little along the lines of, I'm a freshman, I don't even know where my textbooks are? Or was this something that really grabbed you right from the beginning?
Well, the funny thing is that I was a 17-year-old freshman.
Okay.
I turned 17 in the summer before going to college. And so I wasn't even old enough to sign those papers on my own. My parents had to sign it.
Oh my God.
So that's how young and sort of naive we were. But they made
You couldn't even vote.
Yeah. They made no assurances about anything. They helped to guide us. They said, we'll take this case on pro bono. I remember signing the papers. I remember having to get my parents to sign the papers with us. I think there was like a strong feeling that we would just sort of threaten this and then they would reinstate our $16,000 budget.
Mom and Dad, can you sign these papers that'll lead to one of the most revolutionary law cases in women's sports?
Yeah, I'm going to sue the school that I just entered.
They must have been psyched.
Way to go, honey. Episode 3 about my parents, you know what I mean? Like
they're just going to start a whole new podcast, just Dave and Jen.
Yeah. So
the case that came out of that, Cohen versus Brown University, is a landmark case in Title IX, and I think we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. I think it's hard for people to understand that 30 years ago, this just wasn't a thing. I mean, Title IX is so interwoven with women's sports now, right? That's like everybody goes like, oh, Title IX was the reason why women's sports are as big and as consequential as they are today. But 30 years ago when this case happened, that just wasn't the case. And I'm wondering if you can you provide some context for what that was like when the case was going on, how it was received at that time and the reaction of people around you?
Again, I mean, I think people just not really knowing what it was. It was sort of like, wait, what is the basis you're even suing them on? Like, and there wasn't, now we feel all this momentum around women's sports in this country and globally. And, it wasn't anything like that, right? 30 years ago, it was, a lot in fact, Brown was provided a lot of women's opportunities in comparison to other schools.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they were still, largely in violation of Title IX, just in terms of I think the percentage was, 50-50 men to women on campus and 65-35 in terms of the opportunities. And
right.
Anyone who knows sort of the deeper level of Title IX is you don't have to be at 50-50 if there are not women that want to compete, or people of the underrepresented sex, which are always women, but that, you don't have to be at 50-50, but you have to accommodate those interests and abilities. And so if there's anyone saying we want to compete, opportunities.
That's where Title IX really starts to kick in as far as finding those equitable positions for them to be able to compete in.
That's right. But, so the reaction, to your original question was, there were, I think, a lot of students around us who were questioning, deeply what we were doing, why we were doing it. What was the basis of it? The school newspaper came out very strongly against us.
Fascinating.
It was really, just to say, I think there was a real education process for everyone, including us. But, once we kind of knew what we were sort of signing up for, everyone around us of does this mean that, you're going to cut men's programs to get to equality or, to accommodate your interests and abilities and, fair questions. But, that's the number one question that comes up with Title IX, and it's not a fixed pie.
Right. It's not this or that.
Right. You can always grow the pie, or shift the pie, so everybody can compete. And that's what we wanted. And, we were trying to, the other thing that didn't exist 30 years ago was social media. Like, we didn't know anything about PR.
Social media was called a typewriter.
Yeah. So like, how are we to kind of make our voices heard, like make people understand? How do you do that education when you don't have those kinds of means, and again, you're a freshman in college. So it was really interesting first couple months. We were trying to be students. We were also marching down College Hill from the Brown campus to the courthouse, testifying and listening to others testify on our behalf. And
your freshman year was not like other people's freshman years.
No. We filed the lawsuit at the end of my freshman year because we gave it a good year to see if this club varsity thing would work. But we filed the lawsuit, I think, at the end of my freshman year, and then preliminary injunction kicked in. We won that, and kicked in so we could recruit and know that we would still have a team while the case continued. And we won the case in 1994. I remember one of my teammates just writing, with those whiteboards we had on our college doors, like, we won, in huge black letters. And
those whiteboards were the original social media.
They were. Like, when you did to find someone, you wrote a note on their whiteboard.
Hey, I stopped by to say hi.
And then we're really aging ourselves here, Dave.
Oh boy, there are some people listening to this right now going, what are they talking about?
And then then they appealed to the First Circuit. So we went back to court, and we won that in 1996. And then they applied for certiorari to the Supreme Court. And I didn't know what that was at the time. And the Supreme Court pushed it back down to the First Circuit ruling. And so ultimately we came out on top.
It's just this unbelievable process. And again, I don't want to keep hammering this point home, but I think everybody kind of takes Title IX for granted now. It's like, oh, it's this thing and it's this law and it's had all this impact. But back in this time, you were going to the Supreme Court to get these questions answered, and it was going back and forth, and the university was pushing back. And I'm assuming a lot of other universities were backing Brown because they saw what the potential of you winning this case was. So it's just this, pardon this terribly archaic word, which is going to date me even further, which I'm sorry to say, but it is this just rigmarole of legal morass that has come out and just sort of been this, okay, it's Title IX and it's all settled. And I'm wondering, like, since it has been 30 years and expectations around it are just sort of settled in, has the resulting 30 years matched what your expectations after the on the whiteboard we won? To like, has it become what you thought it was going to be, or has it deviated in ways that were unexpected? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so this was the 50th anniversary this year of Title IX. So I think we probably all saw a lot of celebration of that, and also like a real inspection of kind of what it's done for girls and women in sports. And the biggest statistic coming out is that, I won't get the numbers exactly right, but in 1972 boys had 3.5 million opportunities to play sports, and girls had something much lower. Now 50 years later, girls have 3.3 million opportunities to play sports, and boys have also grown in that time. So we're not 50 years later where the boys were 50 years ago, despite that we've made huge gains, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done. But now, it's like you feel that momentum, right? You feel, you watch the NWSL, you watch the WNBA, you watch women's NCAA basketball, you see that these properties, leagues, teams are have an upward trajectory for sure. And you hear Title IX in that conversation, right? Where it's because we've had a whole generation now of kids to have gone through a system where there were more opportunities to come to where they are today. So, it's like half, yes, this is an amazing piece of legislation. It's done so much for for girls and women, and then half, like, there's also still so much work to be done.
And again, it's just, okay, the hand in glove nature of women's sports and Title IX just continues to roll forward. Yes, still work to be done. And I want to transition a little bit to, and we'll use this as sort of the fulcrum for this conversation. I'm wondering how Title IX maybe impacted your approach to sports business as you began your journey post-graduation, post-lawsuit. Were there lessons learned during that process that informed how you approached your sports business work life?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, yes. I say all the time, it's where I found my voice.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't know I had a voice, honestly, when I got to college. I was so young. I was trying, we're all trying to take on the added workload, be athletes, file a lawsuit at the same time.
As you do.
As you do. And but I sort of realized, look, you can really take a stand for things that you believe in or that are personal to you, personal to your own experience. I didn't come out of the lawsuit sort of going, okay, I want to follow obviously a legal path or something like that. It didn't apply to my everyday life, but it did. It did apply in the way of, like, okay, I have a voice, something to say, and if I believe strongly enough in it, I can use my voice. And so the first few years of my career, I was, a strategy consultant. I was just trying to kind of figure out my way through independence and, life as a working person. And I never talked about Title IX. I never talked.
It was in the past.
Not so much it was in the past. It was like, would someone hire me and think, she's litigious in nature or something?
Okay.
It kind of had this, like,
a rabble rouser.
Yeah. And, and of course, like, it's one thing does not mean the other, obviously. Right. But I didn't talk about it because it wasn't, I don't know, it just seemed pretty risky when I was young and trying to make my way through the world. And, ultimately I ended up at Octagon, which, and, into sort of from generalist into sports business. It just really was kind of in the rearview mirror for a while. I didn't.
Did you enjoy the agency experience? I mean, Octagon is one of the biggest. I mean, they have an enormous portfolio and carried so much weight, especially back at that point in time in sports marketing. Was that a relatively seamless move for you getting into that kind of world? And did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I really did enjoy my time there. I was there for a relatively short amount of time. A lot of people come up through the agency world.
Yeah.
I was a biology major in college and pre-med. And I didn't take one business class in college. So I did a lot of learning on the job as I decided, I needed some independence and I didn't want to go to medical school right away. And so I ended up taking a business job and then another consulting job with a healthcare component, so that I was using what I learned.
So that was the bridge.
College, yeah, to make the bridge. And then when I made that jump to Octagon, it was, again, to be more of a specialist in something. And I really didn't think I would move into sports business, but I was like, hey, why not? I have all the skills, of course, like, we know a lot of people come to us and say, well, I love sports, I just want to work in it. But I had all the skills from the sort of service nature of consulting and client relationships and strategy, a lot of strategy to run the BMW account at Octagon for a couple years and, kind of look at their portfolio, execute gold standard execution on all the stuff that they were already doing, but also try to expand their portfolio to things that they were interested in. And I did that for a couple of years. And the agency experience, I mean, I love being on the service side. I think the downside sometimes is that, you don't get to make the final decision.
Right.
So sometimes all the, whether it's in sports or not.
Yeah, you don't own necessarily what it is, right?
Yeah,
You're just product, purely advisory.
Right. Everybody, the thing everybody says is, like, your final product, this beautiful final product that you've worked all these late nights on, could end up on the shelf, It wasn't so much that at Octagon. I think our suggestions were real suggestions. And I ended up leaving more for personal reasons than for other opportunities.
let's jump into that because, I think it's like for a lot of people who are interested in working in sports, like you said, oh my gosh, you're at Octagon and you're working on BMW. I mean, well, what an amazing portfolio. They do so many cool things. And then you make a decision to leave that and go travel for a pretty significant period of time.
Yeah.
What was what was that decision making? Was it just like I gotta do this? What was how did that come about?
Yeah, I got married
Hmm.
and my husband at the time was an investment banker and probably had never taken like more than 2 hours off in his life. And we went on a long honeymoon, a 3-week honeymoon, and we both love to travel and went to New Zealand for 3 weeks and sort of
Oh, good honeymoon.
yeah, and there were some personal things going on my husband's side that I think both with his job and his family. His mom passed away, and
Hmm.
I think he just was like, I don't know if I can do this, this in this form anymore. And so he's like, I want to leave. I want to travel for a while. So it was really his idea. And I had just been promoted at Octagon, and to be honest, there weren't that many women kind of in like leadership positions or kind of moving into leadership positions at Octagon. And so you always sort of feel like you're carrying a little bit of the weight for everybody else. And so I didn't want to be promoted and then leave. So it took me about 6 months to make the decision, like, okay, you know what?
So you both really thought about this. You didn't. This was not a spur of the moment. Screw it. Let's go travel the world for a few years. This was something you really considered carefully.
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't just like drop everything, quit our jobs and go.
You're not the
But
true
in the
bohemians.
end we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we packed up our apartment, rented it to our friends, put all our stuff in my friend's basement in New Jersey, my teammate from Brown, and took one backpack each and
That was it. Just literally what's on your back.
yeah, one bag each, and went out to the World Cup in Germany. That was our start. We did Poland and then we did Germany. We had like the first 2 weeks of our itinerary planned based around the games, the World Cup games that we wanted to go to and had tickets to. And then we had no itinerary after that. And
Just
some of our
open
friends
your
were like,
arms.
"We'll be back in 6 weeks,"
And
And
how
then
long did it last?
we came back 15 months later.
So it's a
Yeah.
pretty great excursion that allowed you to really just take it all in, right? I mean, you how many countries did you visit?
40.
Yeah, okay.
We started off really fast and then we got progressively more tired and
Yeah.
we went and moved and slowed down a little bit, but we went Western Europe and Africa for several months and then Asia for the rest of the time. And
Yeah.
we would have kept going, but my husband's grandfather was ill and
So you needed to get back.
we came back and we thought we'd go back out. And it was September in Boston and we'd just been living in Shanghai. So, just sort of imagine like it was pretty polluted in Shanghai, big city, like
Hmm.
very far away from home. And we came back and like it was September in Boston, which is a beautiful time.
Yeah, yeah.
The clocks were on fire. The air was super fresh and our whole family was here because our his grandfather was ill and it just sort of felt like, okay, we can't, we're like, it's
Time
time
to
to
time to
it's
set
time
down
to
stakes here.
yeah. So there were a lot of places we didn't get to see, but such a good experience to expand our worldview. And I didn't really know going in that that's what we would get, but just like kind of being like locals out there and talking to
Oh,
people about their view of the United States or their view of the world, like you learn so much. You really realize what you don't what you don't.
whenever a recent college graduate asks me for advice, for lack of a better term, like what should I do? What comes next? And even some that don't ask me, and I just feel compelled to tell them anyway, is doing exactly what you said, right? It's such a unique period of time, particularly after college, right? And you did it a little bit later than that, but particularly after college, to get out of wherever you are and go exist somewhere else. I lived in Japan for a year, and it was such a transformative experience because you do get this sense of, oh, I can really live on my own and go to another place where I don't really actually speak the language all that well, and
Oh,
not just live, like not just keep myself alive, but gosh, learn so much and get so many different perspectives and see what else the world has to offer. So if anybody's in college right now and they're listening to this, just go away.
yeah,
Just get out of here.
yeah. The thing, I mean, going in, I'll just say that the thing that we thought to ourselves is, look, we could probably do this after we retire,
Yeah,
after we have kids, and we'll be, I don't know, 60, 65, and travel will just be different, right? But like if you do it when you're in your early 30s and you can kind of run very fast. It's a different experience. And, it was like right in the middle of sort of our career trajectories. And so, it's not always great to take a big pause in that time, but
in that time, it was very different, right?
it was
What's
very
this
different.
gap in your resume?
Yeah. Yeah. But I have no regrets. I mean, it was an amazing experience. I've seen so much of the world, and, I wouldn't take that back.
So you come back, you kind of reestablish yourself in the US, you start working for a soccer organization. And I'm wondering, at what point did the concept for the basketball tournament begin to germinate in your mind? Where were the catalysts there?
Well, first of all, I mean, it wasn't my idea, right? It
Okay.
was our CEO, John Mugar, was his idea, and it had been germinating for him, I think, for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I left the soccer organization, and this got this deck through like a mutual. He had hired someone to sort of help him get the idea off the ground, who was also a former consultant, and then I had met that guy. Anyway, this deck comes across my desk, and I think it was like a $10 million, 1,000 team participative tournament. And I actually immediately called my boss, my old boss at Octagon, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, get a load of this, And
Look at this crazy thing.
yeah, and and I had been working for like a soccer organization in the way that I had sort of had a little taste of entrepreneurship. So my risk profile was decently high in terms of like, would I take a risk on starting something totally new? But it was like, wait, what? And but I did know what I could do for them is, he hadn't come from a sports background, and
Okay.
our other co-founder, Dan, hadn't come from a sports background. And but I knew, look, I know how from the other side to activate sponsorships, that BMW had taken on. I know how to run events, promotion and marketing. I get that whole world. And so I know how to take this concept and bring it out to market. Like what I know from the other side what sponsors are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We created this whole day, and again, consulting experience coming in, for flying in from this side, sort of, we created this whole deck, trying to present the idea. I mean, actually, backing up, we did try to sell it as a reality show for about a year. It was in the time of reality shows, and there were networks interested in it, but also interested in owning it in perpetuity if it was successful. And that wasn't really interesting to us. And so we said, okay, we're going to pilot this. And again, went out to sponsors, really didn't get, a lot of traction. We had some nice meetings.
Yeah, yeah.
But we were like,
But
we're
the trepidation around new concepts and things like that,
new
right?
concept, right? Unproven, a little bit crazy, so a little bit insane.
But yeah, but also, it's funny too because I want to go reflect back on Title IX, right? Everybody sort of takes Title IX for granted back there, but when you started, it wasn't such a, there was no sort of basis, no foundation for understanding that could be applied here. The same thing with these participatory tournaments. This was very new. And yeah, I think
Yep.
you can look at the big three and all these other kinds of tournaments that go on like this. This was brand new. This was revolutionary again. You find yourself sort of back in that same position, having to be like, no, seriously, it's not crazy. It's
Yeah.
going to work and it's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, look, the mission and the vision were very clear, right? Which is sort of, let's try to bring some power back to fans. Let's try to excite competition. You can look at professional sports, and it's just a different model, right? It's a different model. There's a lot of, the whole bottom bowl is corporate seating. They've got, it's very, they do things one way, and there's always the opportunity to do another. And now you see all these startup sports properties, right? You see PLL, and you see so many of them, and it's we all kind of came up in concert, not necessarily at the same time. There was like a $1 million challenge. I don't know if you remember that. The big three was after us. But there were all these sort of $1 million kind of things coming up. So it wasn't totally out there, but it was like, it was definitely a different model, open to anyone. If you think you can win $1 million, and you're, just the guy on the street next to mine, come out and show it.
I don't. I'm pretty sure.
And in that first year, we just wanted to see like, hey, will fans follow this?
Yeah.
And will players play in this? And they were, the standards for a tournament at that time were not particularly high. Like it was like 2 teams show up on the court with the referee also there, and the game starts on time. And
some fans in the stands and go.
Yeah. And, there were like 17 fans in the stands the first year, but it was, look, again, coming from the background of like gold standard events, right? We just want to pull off a great event. We want people to participate in it. We want fans to be interested in it. And we want, to sort of prove out that something like this can work. And there's always luck involved. In any entrepreneurial venture, right? Everybody has their luck story. And one of our luck stories was that Len Elmore's son was competing in TBT that first year, and Len came to Philly U where we had that first tournament, and he called ESPN. It was like, you got to see this thing. They put our final game, which by the way, we let fans vote on where that was going to happen. Nobody really remembers that, and that's like an event marketer's nightmare. But anyway, yes, they voted on Boston, so that was also lucky because Barstool team made the final game, and their court would be Boston. And so obviously, 3 weeks later, we're playing a championship at Boston University, but I could have very well have been in the cornfields of Iowa.
Oh my gosh. Or like Yukon, Alaska. No offense, it's just a little out of the way.
Yeah. And I should just also mention that I was 6 months pregnant at the time.
Oh my gosh. It's like, well, you know what? This is hard to put on these first events, but you know what I need to do is I need to amplify the challenge. Let's get pregnant.
Yeah. So anyway, we pulled it off, and so that's like our luck story, right? There's always some luck involved, and the final product never matches what you originally envisioned it, but there is like a thread, right? There's a thread that maintains throughout, like this is what we're trying to do, and it stayed with us the entire 10 years.
Was there a moment where you were working with TBT and thought, oh wow, this is working? Like people are really seeing this, and it's being successful.
Yeah, that moment was when I knew there'd be another tournament the next year.
Yeah.
The first couple of years.
When you weren't one and done.
Yeah. Do we do another one?
Yeah.
Do we have another one? And there was a moment where, ESPN, we renewed our contract with them, and we knew that there would be a tournament in the next year, and that we could hire people against that. That was really the turning point for us. And very much to John's credit, he wanted to grow this thing slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't some of these startup properties, you see them just throw everything in the pot and see if that will take. You kind of see the whole thing as big as it can be and see if it works. And we were more intentional about how we grew. So in the first couple of years, it was just build a geographic presence, have access to teams on the West Coast.
Really allowing for that organic growth to the experience rather than trying to supercharge it with something that maybe it wasn't quite ready for.
That's right.
I mean, that's a success story. I'm wondering if you could look back, right, to 2013, Jenn Todd, when this thing is getting started from your position of where you are now, if you could get in the time machine and go back to her and say, whatever you do, don't do this. Like, or what advice do you have in retrospect now that you think would be valuable to know then when you're putting on a new event like that?
The good answer to that is I have so much advice because I learned so much, and also I'm
Volume 4.
Yeah, Volume 4. I mean, there's so many directions I could go with that, and also I'm not sure I would change anything. You know what I mean? Yeah. You learn so much. I've learned so much over the last 10 years about myself, my capacity for, to create something, starting a business, growing an organization. There's so much. And yeah, I don't know. So it's like, there's so many lessons I've learned in that time. And at the same time, I'm not sure I would change anything.
Is there one that stands out to you as being like, that's been invaluable to me right up until this very minute in this conversation?
Trust yourself, trust and respect, I think, are probably the biggest things. Trust yourself, your own ability. If you believe in what you're doing, put it out there, don't hold back. We were, there were times that I look back and we were out to every basketball operations person we knew. Like, we were just sending emails wildly, out to people. But, if you believe in something, follow that.
It comes up so much in these conversations, the importance of authenticity, right? To be authentic as a brand, to be authentic as a person, to be authentic in your relationships with folks. I think that's intertwined with trust a little bit too, right? If you trust yourself and you believe in what you're doing, it comes off in those conversations with people in that truly authentic way, which spurs the development of the things that you're trying to do, right? Because if you believe in it, then people are much more inclined to buy into it versus feeling like this person, A, doesn't know what they're talking about, or, they don't believe in what they're talking about. They're just, quote unquote, selling me on this idea. I feel like that's something that maybe it's foundational, but it's so important to what, particularly as entrepreneurs. If you don't believe, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. It's like that comes through in everything you do if it's something that you believe in, right? It comes through, and the sales pitch doesn't sound like a sales pitch. It sounds like something you're authentically interested in and you believe will work. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like, our time is short. Our careers in some ways are short. And so really spending time on the things that you feel strongly about and believe in, or like, it's much better use of the time.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because you left the basketball tournament earlier this year. What is next for Jenn Todd?
I don't know yet. That will have to be episode
I was hoping 5. For a scoop.
You know what? It's interesting. I mean, this because we've talked about this offline, but I've had a lot of conversations that have gone in really very different directions. And I just needed to regroup. I was exhausted.
A little burned out.
I was totally burnt out. And it took me a couple months to just say that without shame, because, I was the person who powered through. And
I'm going to get this done.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're Jenn Todd. You just someone literally said that to me once, you just power through, but after 2 pandemic tournaments, I couldn't do it anymore. So yeah, things have gone in
options open
from entrepreneurial to very established organizations. So you'll have to tune back in.
We'll have to volume 5. My gosh.
Volume 5. We have so much to talk about, Dave.
Oh my gosh. We could definitely make a 6-hour podcast out of this, but I'm not sure everybody's ready for that.
I'm sure they're not. I think this is one of those moments, right? Yeah. It's like, do you follow, I don't know, what's the priority? And obviously I have my family life to balance out with these opportunities. But I will tell you one thing. The time that I've had off has been so lovely in terms of just being able to connect with people that I wouldn't have otherwise connected with had I been, kind of charging ahead with TBT. And I've met so many really interesting people doing really interesting things who I honestly, I just wouldn't have met otherwise. And I think everybody always says it's better to find your next thing while you're in your thing. But that wasn't going to work for me. I couldn't do that. So
there is a lot to be said for being able to take that time to take that deep breath and make a decision not based out of, oh, holy crap, I got to get the next job, but to have the time to reflect on priorities.
Yeah.
Both from a life standpoint, but from a psychic income standpoint, what's going to really supercharge you on your next adventure? And it's going to be fascinating to see what that is, Jenn Todd, as you move on to onto your next phase, on the thing that does grab you and really excites you about what you're going to do. We're going to wrap up, but before I let you go, we are going to enter the lightning round. I have a series of questions for you that you are unprepared for. And
totally unprepared.
Totally unprepared. And I want you to give just quick, there's a new word, quick, rapid responses. The first thing that comes into your mind. Okay, you ready?
This could be bad.
It's going to be awesome. Here we go. Lightning round. Okay, you've been to over 40 countries. Where would you go back to tomorrow?
Egypt.
What's still on your list to visit?
Japan.
Okay. You competed in gymnastics at Brown. What was your least favorite discipline?
Bars. I was not strong. I didn't have strong. It's like you either do bars and beam and you're very technically savvy, or you do floor and vault and you're like very powerful. And I was more the floor and vault.
All right. So no bars. All right. Just go this way because you were young in college too. No bars. It worked on a variety of different ways. You could buy a sports franchise tomorrow. What league would it be in?
NWSL.
NWSL. I think it's a very smart choice right now. You could be any athlete for 24 hours. Who would it be?
Ooh. I don't even have an answer to that.
You don't even have to answer. All right, volume 7. All right, last one. Who is your number one LinkedIn success story?
You.
That's the answer. You got that one right.
I don't even remember it was me that reached out to you or you that reached out to me, but this has been, you're like
at friend, the top.
Therapist, counselor.
I'm just so gratified. I see you didn't have to prepare for the lightning round at all. It just flowed perfectly.
Well, I'm still going to think about what athlete, who I would like to be.
All right, we'll tell you what. Post it later, and we can use that as a follow-up to this. Jenn Todd, thanks so much for spending time today.
Yeah, of course. Great to do it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this ADC Partners podcast. For more information about ADC Partners, please visit our website at adcpartners.com.